Good evening and welcome to Turner Classic Movies. I'm Dave Karger. Tonight we're honoring a true Hollywood legend, Academy Award winner Allan Arkin, who passed away this year on June 29th at the age of 89. Arkin's extraordinary movie career began with his feature film debut in 1966 and never stopped. He was still working steadily right up to the end. After starting out as a folk singer and member of Chicago's Second City improv troupe, Arkin made his Broadway debut in 1961, followed in 1963 by his first lead performance in Enter Laughing, which won him a Tony Award. 3 years later, his feature film debut in The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming earned him an Oscar nomination. Stick around for that film later this evening. Arkin always insisted that he didn't care about winning awards, but his record is a testament to his tremendous talent, range, and endurance. In between 1966 and 2012, he earned another 3 Academy Award nominations and took home the Oscar in 2007 for his priceless performance as a foul-mouthed grandfather in Little Miss Sunshine. Up first tonight is the movie that earned Arkin his second Oscar nomination from 1968, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. The film was adapted from a novel by Carson McCullers, who also wrote The Member of the Wedding and Reflections in a Golden Eye. This was McCullers' first book, published in 1940, but it took 28 years to bring it to the big screen. The story centers on a man named Singer, an ironic name because not only can he not sing, he also isn't able to speak or hear. He moves to a small southern town to be close to a friend who's been sent to a nearby hospital, and although the locals struggle to understand him at first, he grows to have a profound impact on everyone he meets. For Allan Arkin, who plays Singer, this was one of his earliest big screen performances, and both he and his co-star Sandra Locke earned Oscar nominations. This was Locke's film debut at the age of 23. From 1968, also with Stacy Keach, Chuck McCann, Percy Rodriguez, and the wonderful Cicely Tyson, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. Originally, Montgomery Clift was considered for the role of John Singer, but he passed away in 1966, and the part was eventually offered to Allan Arkin. Arkin was still new to Hollywood, but he had already earned an Oscar nomination for his film debut 2 years earlier in The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. His poignant performance as John Singer in The Heart is a Lonely Hunter earned him another Oscar nomination, and he won the New York Film Critics Circle Award in 1968. The reviews unanimously praised his performance, but unfortunately, the author behind the story, Carson McCullers, didn't get to see it. McCullers published The Heart is a Lonely Hunter 28 years earlier, and she was involved in discussions about the script when this adaptation got underway, but she died just a few days before the cameras started rolling. Up next, Allan Arkin returns in an entirely different movie he made just 1 year earlier, a thriller from 1967 starring Audrey Hepburn. Hi, I'm Dave Karger. Welcome back to TCM, where we're paying tribute to the late, great Allan Arkin. Arkin's long and prolific acting career began in the 1960s when he became an early member of the Chicago improv comedy troupe, The Second City. He gave his first lead performance on Broadway in the 1963 comedy Enter Laughing, based on a semi-autobiographical novel by Carl Reiner. Then he joined Reiner on screen 3 years later when he made his feature film debut in The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, a comedy about the Cold War. But despite his strong start as a comic actor, Allan Arkin's range went well beyond comedy, as we're about to see in our next film. It was the third feature film of Arkin's career, and he gives one of the most terrifying performances you'll ever see. From 1967, it's Wait Until Dark. Audrey Hepburn stars as a woman who's recently lost her sight and is learning to adjust, especially when she's on her own. Her situation suddenly gets a lot more dangerous when she accidentally comes into possession of a doll that's been stuffed with heroin. Allan Arkin co-stars as a murderous thug who desperately wants that doll and teams up with a couple of con men to trick and torture Hepburn into giving it up. Wait Until Dark was based on a play by Frederick Knott, the same writer behind the play Dial M for Murder, which Alfred Hitchcock adapted for the screen. Just as Hitchcock had done, director Terrence Young chose to keep the action in this film limited to a single apartment unit, where Hepburn and Arkin play an elaborate game of cat and mouse that will keep you on the edge of your seat. From 1967, also with Richard Crenna, Jack Weston, and Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., here is Wait Until Dark. According to an Audrey Hepburn biography, when Wait Until Dark was first screened at a 900-seat theater in 1967, those final moments of the film left the capacity crowd gasping and shrieking with fright. Nearly 6 decades later, it still packs a punch. Allan Arkin had only just come to Hollywood 1 year earlier, but already he had an Oscar nomination under his belt for The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, and he would score another one a year later for The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, released in 1968. Audrey Hepburn's performance in Wait Until Dark earned her an Oscar nomination, the fifth and final one of her career, but the award that year went to Katharine Hepburn for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Unlike her co-star Allan Arkin, who was just getting started in Hollywood, Audrey Hepburn chose to wind down her film career after this. She went into a semi-retirement and didn't make another movie for almost a decade when she returned opposite Sean Connery in Robin and Marion in 1976. Up next, our salute to Allan Arkin continues with his feature film debut in a comedy from 1966 directed by Norman Jewison.
Next on TCM, The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. Then Poppy, and later The In-Laws. Serpentine with Allan Arkin on TCM tonight.
Welcome back to TCM. I'm Dave Karger. Tonight we're honoring the life and legacy of Allan Arkin, who passed away earlier this year at the age of 89. We just saw Arkin terrorizing Audrey Hepburn in the 1967 thriller Wait Until Dark. And if you need proof of his extraordinary range, you're about to see it. Arkin delivers an entirely different but equally compelling performance in a zany comedy directed by Norman Jewison. From 1966, it's The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. The movie was based on a comic novel by Nathaniel Benchley, the son of the famous humorist Robert Benchley, and the story came out of the Cold War fears about the U.S. and the Soviet Union using submarines to spy on each other. The movie begins when a Russian submarine commander, played by Allan Arkin, accidentally runs his vessel aground on an island off the coast of New England. He sends a small crew ashore to find a boat that can tow the submarine away quietly, but things quickly devolve into hilarious chaos when the villagers see the Russians and think that their island has been invaded. Allan Arkin made his feature film debut here, and his performance earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. He's joined by comedy writer, actor, and producer Carl Reiner, who plays the head of a family caught in the middle of the imaginary Russian invasion. The cast also includes Brian Keith, Theodore Bikel, Jonathan Winters, and our dear friend Eva Marie Saint. In addition to Arkin's Oscar nomination, the movie was also nominated for Best Picture for its screenplay by William Rose, the man who wrote It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and for its editing by future director Hal Ashby. From 1966, enjoy The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. That was Allan Arkin's feature film debut, and his performance earned him an Oscar nomination, the first of 4 in his career. He was nominated again 2 years later for The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, and most recently for his performance in 2012's Argo. Arkin took home the award in 2007 for his supporting performance in Little Miss Sunshine. Setting the bar high from the outset was nothing new for Allan Arkin. In 1963, he won a Tony Award for just his second Broadway performance, his debut as a leading man, in the play Enter Laughing. That play was based on a semi-autobiographical novel written by Arkin's co-star in The Russians Are Coming, Carl Reiner. Arkin and Reiner went on to work together again 3 decades later in Slums of Beverly Hills from 1998. Arkin was also supposed to play Saul Bloom in Steven Soderbergh's 2001 remake of Ocean's 11, but he dropped out and was replaced by Carl Reiner. Up next, we have another film Allan Arkin made at the start of his career from 1969, co-starring Rita Moreno.
Next on TCM, Poppy, then The In-Laws, and later Hôtel du Nord. Voulez-vous TCM avec moi tonight?